My talk is about Picasso's variations on Velazquez's well-known painting Las Meninas. I approach this theme of variations in cinematic context now. By that I mean that I focus on the use of frames. Picasso actually fragmented, we can say cropped, the picture plane of Las Meninas in this case, and he modified the fragmented, the cropped paintings of him. And let me show you just an overview of the series. Just quickly, because at the first sight, it is obvious, I think, that the whole series has a kind of a repetitive quality, and I would like to emphasize this repetitive quality in my talk. My perspective is a little bit shifted in the terms of the main focus of this conference, because I usually don't seek or track the picturesque or rather the pictorial form in films, how the pictorial forms emerge in the films, but I am interested rather in art practices where cinema or cinematic devices are applied consciously or unconsciously. So Picasso painted his Las Meninas variations in 1957 through nearly 5 months from August to December. These repetitive variations on Las Meninas with modifications and with abrupt changes or sudden cuts, we can say, in terms of framing and painterly styles, constitute a series. The series consists of 58 paintings, and Picasso himself considered them as a unity, and it is very important, I think. The 58 paintings form a firm, a solid unity, and even the order of completion of the single paintings, frames, so to say, the definite day, the precise date when they was to be made is really relevant and unchangeable, so to say, according to the artist's concept. In the first part of my presentation, I would like to locate my subject in the context of museum display and then in the oeuvre of the artist, whose late series and paraphrases of old masters are not overinterpreted at all, and for a long time they were nearly ignored or even mocked and condemned. In the second part of my presentation, I want to talk about the use of frame in Picasso's process and what follows from this, his personal, we can say, ironic, playful, and we might say subversive interpretation of the well-known painting Las Meninas, painted by Velazquez. As I mentioned just a minute ago, this series of paintings consists of 58 paintings that Picasso himself considered as a unity. However, there is a huge difference between the museal display and the online presentation of the series in the terms of chunking or disjunction of the pieces of the series. The online presentation is made also by the museum itself in a related blog. And I think that in this case, the online presentation from a specific point of view is closer to Picasso's own idea, even if we consider in paintings when the museal display and the exhibition value, speaking with Walter Benjamin, is the first context of modern art. On the website of the museum, we are informed that Picasso resolved not to sell any of them, and in order to ensure the unity of the series, he donated it to the Museum Picasso of Barcelona in 1968. And the artist left a record of the rhythm at which he was working, dating each of the canvases on the back, and even he noted the order of paintings when he painted more than one on the same day. I would like to note here that it was not a singular case. The precise dating was a kind of routine of him, or more than a routine. Picasso was attracted and fascinated, even I may say possessed, by the process of painting, by the timing of the process. And that is why he precisely dated all of his canvases and even sketches. We have a photo that was took in La California, the villa when he lived when he made this series, and we can see the backside of other paintings that he dated every canvases of him and even sketches. We know that Picasso was lamenting, or at least thinking, over the disappearance of the successive phases of painting. I quote, "I would leave it as it is, while I began over and carried it to a more advanced state on another canvas. Then I would do the same thing with that one. There would never be a finished canvas, but just the different states of a single painting, which normally disappear in the course of work. So the variations on a theme meant to Picasso the constant progressive transformations of a certain basic theme, and at the same time a kind of documentation, we can say, of the life history or the biography of a certain work. As he mentioned during his last period, when these theme variations dominated his work, he was much more interested in the movement of thought. In another place in a text, I quote him, "Pictures went forward toward completion by stages. Every day brought something new. A picture used to be a sum of additions. In my case, a picture is a sum of destructions. I do a picture, then I destroy through another layer that is superimposed on the previous layer, so to say." So I continue the quote. "In the end, though, nothing is lost. It would be very interesting to preserve photographically not the stages, but the metamorphosis of a picture. Possibly, one might then discover the path followed by the brain in materializing a dream." So, transformation and metamorphosis are keywords here, I think. Picasso was obsessed with the transformation of motifs, the metamorphosis of forms and figures, but we know from his own words that he had a great admiration toward the stillness and silence of the image also. For him, the silence and the stillness go together, the stillness that is painting's hallmark, the painting's genius. Quote again, "The role of painting is not to depict movement, to put reality into motion. Its role is rather, for me," says Picasso, "to arrest motion. In order to freeze the image, you have to outdistance motion. If not, you are always running behind. Only at that very moment do you have a reality." Well, it seems a contradiction that painting's hallmark is its stillness and silence for him. However, at the same time, he is obsessed with the metamorphosis of figures and the transformations that can be followed only through the progress of work. To my mind, this contradiction was solved and dissolved in Henri Clouzot's famous film, Le Mystère Picasso, filmed in 1954 and released in 1955, just in the same year when Picasso moved into the Villa La California, where he began not just new series of paintings, but began a new life after François Gillot, we can say, walked out of his life. But I want to come back to the site of La California later, I just mentioned it now. So, back to the film made by Henri Clouzot, Le Mystère Picasso, in English, The Mystery of Picasso. In the respect of my subject, Picasso's Las Meninas variations, in this film, Picasso's involvement in contributing to a film achieves its highest peak. We know that Picasso was obsessed with the metamorphosis of motifs, and he was possessed by the process of painting and drawing. Clouseau, in this film, does not use an already completed work, as other filmmakers did in earlier films contributed to by Picasso, and they were highly valued by André Bazin also. But in this film, Clouseau, or rather the camera, follows and records simultaneously the process of drawing, how and when the picture is coming into being through the metamorphosis of lines. We follow how a circle is turning into a fish, the fish into a hen, and the hen into an owl. So here we can see that the canvas and the celluloid film strip exist together. Picasso's drawings and paintings exist just as moving pictures here. The sequences of the film resemble to animation films because we cannot see the artist drawing, just his lines emerging and developing into changing forms. We follow the process of drawing and painting in time. The film not just documents, it creates paintings in cooperation with the artist. So without the apparatus of the cinema, we wouldn't have this experience, and we never see paintings and artworks in this way at museum displays. So it was a new aesthetic form, speaking with André Bazin, a new symbiosis of painting and cinema. As André Bazin writes in his famous essay, related essay, Painting and Cinema. So back to the museal display again. The ideal arrangement, according to Picasso's concept, would be to exhibit the all Las Meninas variations in a single space and keep the chronological order of pieces. But unfortunately, the architectural structure of the museum doesn't allow this kind of display. In order to show together the 45 interpretations, the curators say 45 interpretations, not 58, 45 interpretations of Velazquez'S Las Meninas, the curators felt themselves obliged to exhibit in another room the 9 pictures of the pigeons. This one, and here juxtaposed with the photograph. Picasso loved being photographed, and he had many friends, many photographers around him, and an American photographer took lots of photographs in the Villa La California, and I juxtaposed the photographs that we have, for example, here. And later I can show you more. So I lost my line. So the curators arranged in another room the 9 pictures of the pigeons next to Picasso's studio, and the 3 landscapes of the Bay of Cannes and the portrait of Jacqueline. Here, the landscapes. So in the museum display, the series is taken apart, disjuncted, and the 9 pigeon paintings and the 3 landscapes, as well as the portrait of Jacqueline, are cannot seen as the part of the Las Meninas interpretation. However, on the museum's blog, we can see the whole series, the variations one by one in their succession. My starting point is that I accept the artist's concept. I take it seriously, and my concern is to decipher that why and how Picasso would mean the involvement of the views of and from his studio in his Las Meninas interpretation. The pigeon paintings and landscapes are not just additional pieces to my mind, but they are themselves a constituent part of the Las Meninas interpretation to my mind. So, let's see this one again. My assumption is that these paintings depicting the view from the studio of Picasso makes visible, represent through a kind of actualization the always invisible, absent however structuring part of Las Meninas, the space in front of the painting, where the all-time beholder takes place, next to the royal couple who are reflected in the mirror at the back in Velazquez's painting. So Leo Steenberg's interpretation is important for me in the line of my argument. He says in his study, Velazquez located the picture's dramatic and psychological focus outside itself, displaced from what the picture actually shows to what it beholds. So the picture beholds something in front of it. It is as though the depicted scene were a dependency, caught in reaction to its deferred center. That center, of course, is on our left. It resides in the royal pair bestriding the room's central axis in line with the looking glass in which their reflection appears. There is surely no painting in which the emission of sight from human eyes becomes quite so structural. No painting whose dramatis personae, the characters, the protagonists of the painting, are grouped and ranked according to what they see. So the picture plane is structured according to what the protagonist in the picture plane can see. It is an imaginary interplay between the beholder and the protagonist of the painting. However, in Picasso's Las Meninas variations, the royal couple's presence is rather reduced, minimized, or diminished, but it is substituted by the imaginary, virtual, and at the same time actual views that are seen by the painting's characters. Actually, the paintings of his studio. And now I carry on with location of the Las Meninas variations in Picasso's oeuvre. I want to underline two important details regarding the place and the time of the conception of Las Meninas variations. First, about the place. As I mentioned earlier, Picasso made his Las Meninas variations in his new studio in the villa named La Californie in Cannes, where he lived. He moved into the house in 1955, and probably its interior really impressed, fascinated, and inspired him. His new studio paintings prove this. Let's see. What is important to note here that Picasso's interest in studio paintings was revived at this time, probably under the influence of his new residency, and his studio paintings are full of references. This one, for example, refers and evokes sources from other painters' studio paintings. So here, Braque painting and Courbet, and another one made by Matisse. So in this time, in his new residency, he was stirred up to start making pieces, drawings, sketches, paintings about his studio. No wonder that his attention was grabbed again by the great model of studio painting, Las Meninas. However, it is not evident that an artist looks at Las Meninas as a studio painting. Thomas Struth, for instance, who also dealt with Las Meninas, and the painting is embedded in his huge photographs made in Prado, and the figures of the painting are incorporated in the photographical scene. So he, Struth, interprets Las Meninas as a family portrait. Before all, he says, it is a family portrait, he says it in an interview, with a little girl in the center of it. I mentioned Thomas Struth here for more reasons. First, in another interview, he emphasizes the playfulness, the desired playfulness of spectatorship. I quote, "In my museum work, I wanted to connect with the paintings I choose in a particular way through photographing groups of visitors corresponding with the figures in the paintings I photographed. It was maybe like an attempt of resurrection, to give people a hint that these masterworks, or so-called master artworks, were not created as such when they were made. They were made by artists in particular circumstances of their daily life, and these works were not born as the famous artworks that they are now. I wanted to make them to look like more contemporary works. The interesting question is, why do works of art speak to us? Why do we even want to look at them? Because they were made with condensed information about love and desire and beauty and all kinds of complex emotional qualities. Because of their artistic craftsmanship, what resonates in us during the observation, which is a playful process. And one thing that destroys play is too much respect. When you have too much respect, you cannot play. You are intimidated, you become passive. I felt that people would go to museums with too much respect. They don't really know what they are allowed to think. Maybe in the end they only go to the museum galleries because they know the artist or because of the specific famous paintings. And and the other reason, I quote Thomas Struth, when I mentioned his working process and his view, is his limitless fantasy and imaginary. In another interview, he says, "It would be great to be able to be in the picture and to look out of it into the face of the observers." It resonates with Picasso's view and attitude. So like Struth, or Struth like Picasso, both of them are wandering between the image of art history, makes pictures about pictures, and the act of looking is a reciprocal, a mutual interaction between the gazes of the characters, protagonists in the pictures, and the beholders in front of it. And this aspect, the imagined perspective and view of the protagonists in the picture plane, I think is really relevant considering the place and the role of the so-called pigeon paintings of Las Meninas variations. And now back to the time when Picasso made his Las Meninas variations. As I mentioned earlier, in 1954, Picasso contributed to a film made by Henri Clouzot, Le Mystère Picasso. It was not the only film that he contributed to. Alain René's Guernica and Luciano Emer's film titled Simple Picasso was important for André Bazin also. His contribution to a film achieved its highest peak in Clouzot's film, as I mentioned. It looks like an animation film that reflects perfectly Picasso's obsession. It is the materialization of his obsession, following and documenting the process of drawing and painting, making visible his desire or dream, preserving, making visible, and at the same time preserving the faces of the metamorphoses. But I will, because there is no much time left, so what I really would like to emphasize that Picasso doesn't want to abandon the frame. Enjoys, it is obvious that he enjoys what he can do inside the frame. It is the base of composition. However, he stretches the edges of it. He usually often breaks the fourth wall. And to fulfill another wish or satisfy another desire, to capture the metamorphoses of the forms and layers, he multiplies the frames. And that is the point, that is what I argue, that he needed the frame, he enjoyed that, how can he varies the forms and follows the metamorphosis inside the frame. He needs it really, he enjoys it. It's obvious when we see this film that he really enjoys. The film director instructs him that how much time left for him to finish, but he enjoys enjoys it, but he needs to multiply, to fulfill his wish, to follow the metamorphosis. He multiplies, and that is why I have the intuition that this kind of process resembles the animation film. And now, so I skip. And so I would like to end with showing you this Richard Hamilton work. Richard Hamilton edited into one single picture plane what Picasso was making through 4 months through the series of 15 paintings. It was a commission for Hamilton. He was invited to contribute an album, an homage à Pablo Picasso, celebrating Picasso's 19th birthday in 1971. And here you can read that's what he said. But I think that an artist interpreting another artist's work is always very instructive. Hamilton condensed into one single picture what Picasso did through the variations on Las Meninas. He displayed his various, often unreconcilable styles and elements of his painting. He minimized the royal presence. We can say it is very playful and very ironic that here we can see Picasso and we can see the sickle and the hammer, the emblem of the Soviet on the chest of him. And substituted it with his own presence. However, some phenomena or things are missing from Hamilton's playful and ironic work. For example, the animation of the flow of thoughts and the documentation of Picasso's own studio, the views from La Californie, the fertile disorder of his environment, this chaotic soil for the genesis of pictures, where only the children and the animals were allowed to stroll freely in his studio and his rooms. And what is here missing is the immersion of the beholder. I have the intuition that it would be great to imagine an installation when we are in the circle of the series, because I think that I have the intuition that Picasso put the beholder in the circle of his series, and he accomplished the missing part of Las Meninas. So, thank you very much for your attention.